Be prepared. That was the motto of the Boy Scouts. The law of the Scouts was different. The law stated that a scout must be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Also, apparently naive. Stupid. Idiotic. Trusting. They all worked. Nick had no other answers after looking at the emails on his wife's iPhone. He usually didn't look at anything on her phone at all, which she was well aware of, so she didn't bother with the extra protection. After all, he was a Boy Scout. He was as honest as anyone else. He didn't invade anyone's privacy. But Nick's wife was going out of town in a few weeks, and Nick was trying to remember the name of her hotel. She'd told him before, but he hadn't paid attention and wanted to avoid an argument about why he hadn't. Such arguments had been happening more often lately. After their wedding 5 years ago, this trip would be the longest time they would be apart, and Nick thought about doing something romantic, like sending flowers. After all, what could be better than showing the woman he loved how much he loved her and sending her flowers while she was several thousand miles away in the city of love, Paris? It was the city of love, sure, but he wasn't the one she was going to love. No, it was Dwayne who was also going on the trip, typing in his wife's phone access code, the date of their wedding. Nick found himself reading one of the work-safe emails his wife and Dwayne had exchanged over the past few weeks. They'd discussed a nighttime stroll down the Champs-Élysées and then a moonlit boat ride on the Seine. Almost as surprising as the affair itself was the fact that Nick's wife Linda and her lover Dwayne exchanged messages using their work email accounts. She should have known better. So should Dwayne. Like Nick, Linda was a lawyer. Dwayne worked as a paralegal at Linda's firm. All three of them had done enough document handling in major litigation where huge teams of lawyers and paralegals read each of the hundreds of thousands of emails that had been received or were being considered for receipt as part of document discovery. There was always a story about an affair by one or two idiots, and then the lawyers would try to figure out if the affair was relevant, and if so, how to limit damages. Nick didn't really pay attention to what Linda had told him about the trip and the name of the hotel where the team would be staying, because something funny was going on. At that moment, Nick didn't know what it was, but instinct made his hair stand on end. 5 years as a lawyer, listening to clients lie and listening to lawyers carefully avoid lying by not telling everything, had made his listening skills sharp. And something was wrong when Linda initially told him about the trip. A very boring arbitration case that would keep them so busy they wouldn't even be able to enjoy the sights. She said it without looking at him at all, and a little too flippantly. She knew Paris was one of Nick's favorite cities, and they always talked about going together because Linda had never been there. Nick found her response odd, but he hadn't even envisioned this worst-case scenario. The line of the email he was looking at now, however, was an awl stabbed straight into his heart. "Why don't you just lose the Boy Scout so we can spend more time together and not worry?" Dwayne wrote last night. "I feel safe with him," Linda replied. "So why are you screwing me behind his back every chance you get?" "You're making me wet," smiley face emoji. Nick didn't know what to do at the moment, other than print out the email on the Wi-Fi printer they had in the basement. Just in case. As an experienced lawyer, his first order of business was to preserve the evidence. Printing out the letter and putting it in his computer bag, Nick thought for a moment. He definitely knew what he wanted to do. The way he saw it, he had a win-win option. Pretend to get ready to kiss her, but then smash face into one of the trees in the woods behind the house. Dwayne, on the other hand, would experience less mercy. Before hurting someone, he needed to think. It was thinking that made him a lawyer. He was paid to use his brain, not his muscles. And he had to think fast, because Linda had gone for a run and would be back soon. But before he could start thinking, he needed to finish his assignment and find a hotel. But not to send flowers. He didn't know what he would need that information for, but he knew he needed it. Perhaps as a purpose. Here, La Clef Tour Eiffel, near the Trocadero, across the river from the Eiffel Tower. About a 5-minute walk from the International Chamber of Commerce, where Linda and Dwayne would be working on their arbitration case with the rest of the team, at least when the two lovers had free time between sex. At the hotel, he had to do a quick computer search on Virginia's divorce laws. Some of it he remembered from his bar exam days, 5 years ago, but it was always good to check. Adultery was grounds for divorce and could affect issues like alimony and property division. But there were objections to the charge of adultery. One of these was connivance. The defense was to find out about the adultery and then voluntarily resume sexual relations and continue living together. So he needed to get out of the house fast. And no confrontation. Not yet. He intended to unleash total shock and awe on her with no unknowns. He was going to dominate the battlefield to end this marriage. And that meant he'd have to lie. It was incompatible with Scout law, but this was war. After all, it was Churchill who said, "In war, truth is so valuable that it must always be accompanied by a bodyguard of lies." Right now, Nick's lies would serve a more important purpose. None of them were under oath anyway. He went up to the bedroom and started packing. He finished quickly and set the suitcases by the front door. He was just about to gather all the necessary paperwork, bank and credit card statements, 401k and IRA accounts, car papers, paycheck statements, mortgage statements, and Linda's latest student loan balance, when she returned from her run. He heard her in the kitchen as he came up from his basement office. He decided to look concerned and out of place when he saw her drinking Gatorade. Her shoulder-length brown hair was gathered into a ponytail. She looked pretty good. Too bad she was a disgusting whore. He realized that love was dead. "Guess what? I'm going to Paris," he said with a grim smile. The color disappeared from Linda's face. Her blue eyes turned pale. "What?" "Paris, Virginia." She quickly lost her shocked expression. "Sven just called," Nick continued. "We're testifying in my insurance case, and we need to prepare a witness. Apparently, we just lost a motion to compel. The judge is furious, and the whole court schedule has turned into chaos. I'll be on the road for a few weeks, although I may have time to stop by and do laundry from time to time." "Poor little thing," Linda said with a suitably concerned look. "Maybe your firm is recruiting." "I'd rather go to your Paris," Nick said, and he saw the worry return to her face. But then she smirked. "Send me a resume. Maybe you have the right pedigree for us to consider you for the job." It was a tease. Linda's law school was ranked higher in the academic rankings than Nick's school. Then, perhaps feeling guilty, she made a movement as if about to hug him, but Nick turned and went down to his office before she could close the gap. The visions of him punching her in the face were coming back, and he wasn't sure he could keep them under control. Rising, Linda asked what he wanted for dinner. "I can't stay. I'll get something to eat on the road." Sven was beyond excited and wanted me to hit the road immediately. He spoke as he walked through the kitchen. Linda followed him to the door, looking a little worried. When he took the suitcases and headed for the exit, she pressed her lips together for a goodbye kiss. "I'm sorry. I think I have a cold. I had a sore throat this afternoon. Maybe it's allergies, but I don't want you to catch anything." Linda followed him to the car as he loaded it up. "When are you coming back?" "Probably not until Friday at the earliest. After Paris, we're going to Roanoke. And next week we have to go to Baltimore." Perhaps he was becoming even more paranoid, but he thought he could hear the gears of her brain turning as he watched her stare off into the distance, as if calculating what unexpected possibilities his absence would open up. He waved goodbye and drove away from the driveway. He hoped she'd just assume he was busy with work and annoyed that he'd been called in on a Saturday. His acting skills weren't capable of much more than that right now. But he suspected she was already planning to ask Dwayne out. Nick drove until he pulled up to the nearest shopping center with a coffee shop. Like most lawyers, he thought better on paper. As he sipped his coffee, he began to make a list of cases. He paused for a moment to realize that he had never once thought about reconciliation. It wasn't even an option. There would be retribution. The only question was the degree. He was interrupted by the phone ringing. He didn't recognize the number. "Yes?" Impatiently he replied. "Mr. Buford? I'm Sam Granger. I don't think we've met, but I'll get right to the point. I got your number from old real estate records. I'm in the business of buying old houses and tearing them down to build McMansions. I know. Everyone hates what I do, but they don't hate me as much when I give them a check." Granger spoke so fast that Nick didn't have time to react, only thinking that the house wasn't old, it was cozy, and why the hell was he talking about tearing it down? But then, his rational mind took over. Well, I'd like to buy your house so I can tear it down. I'd offer to build you a mansion, but I can never guarantee the timing of new construction, especially with county permits and all that. I make all my profits by renting them out quickly, but I think I could get you a very good price if you and your wife are motivated to sell. Nick could hardly contain a Grinch-like smile. Linda had picked out a house shortly before their wedding. It was an old ranch house, but with a nice yard that looked right out onto a patch of woods with a creek running through it. It was close to major highways but was quite secluded and peaceful. What finally won her over was the treehouse in the yard across from the bedroom window. She liked that it was a house ready for children. Nick liked the price and the fact that it was only 20 minutes from a major metro parking lot. That and a 30-minute train ride to work wasn't a bad option for the neighborhood. Mr. Granger, I will be busy at work for the next few days, so I cannot guarantee access to the property. Call me Sam. I don't need to see him inside. Like I said, it's a demolition job, and I've already checked it out from the outside. Can you meet me Sunday morning, Sam? Of course. By the way, I'll probably do the closing of the deal myself by executing a power of attorney for my wife. She is very busy with work at the moment. No problem. I'll give you the form we use. Nick noted the address and began to draw the outline of a plan. She felt safe with her Boy Scout, didn't she? That was because Linda didn't know that good old Lord Baden-Powell had used the military scouts as a model for what would become his boys' movement. Skills such as stealth, cunning, and self-reliance. Ambush, in other words. She never sees what awaits her until it's too late. But first, a reconnaissance. To that end, he knocked over his empty coffee cup and walked out to his car to get some privacy. He dialed a number on his cell phone and dialed a number. Frank? He asked when the call was answered. I need a favor. And I need it now. Frank Barry was a private investigator. During his 5 years as a corporate lawyer, Nick made it a habit to help poor people with their legal problems on a pro bono basis. This was in line with his ideas of public service. In addition, he received a per-hour fee from his firm for doing so and real courtroom experience, something his day job usually didn't provide. One of his law school classmates recommended Frank to help with a nasty divorce case in which a stepfather was sexually abusing his stepdaughter. Frank's evidence allowed him to apprehend the boyfriend when the sluggish police response failed, and thanks to that evidence, the divorce case was handled quickly. Frank listened while Nick explained what he had learned. And you think your wife would invite him into her bed tonight? Is she that brazen? Arrogant. She was one of the top students in her class in law school. Thinks she can do no wrong. I'll do it myself. I'm indebted to you. The Rivera divorce case brought me a lot of good publicity. The phone hasn't stopped ringing. I appreciate that, Frank, Nick said. By the way, there's a treehouse in the backyard you might want to use. It opens right into the bedroom, and she likes to do martial arts with the curtains open. It used to freak me out, but then it started working its way up, you know? You can get there by going through the woods and jumping over the creek after dark. No fences, no dogs. There's a service road on the other side where you can park. Thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to hide a camera outside, aimed at the front of the house, to keep track of who comes and goes and when. Great. And you're using Harry to get a divorce, right? I'm assuming you want a divorce. Yes and yes. Okay. I know how he likes to have the affidavit and report done. If you're right, we'll find out very soon. Nick then called Harry. Is this about the law school reunion, Nick? I've gotten 5 calls already asking me to contribute to their capital fund. No. I want to hire you. Linda's cheating, and I want to burn the bitch. After Nick had brought him up to speed, Harry said, Come back tomorrow. I know it's Sunday, but I still had some paperwork to deal with at the office, so I was going to stop by. We could start with this. It sounds like you've already dealt with how not to indulge in adultery. Harry is dealing with clear and convincing evidence. The hardest part will be fighting over the financial settlement. She's also a lawyer at a large firm, so she has the resources to fight and drag the case out, plus people from her firm are advising her. Leave it to me, Nick said. I think we can settle this like civilized people. Then that means you're not going to burn the bitch, but okay. We'll see what you come up with. His last call was more delicate. Hello? Maggie? It's Nick. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Maggie? You son of a bitch. I'm glad to talk to you too, dear, after all these years. What do you want, Nick? After all this time? I need your help. I thought Linda was your assistant. It's because of Linda. She's cheating. What a surprise. Can't help you emotionally or sexually these days. I'm dating. And I'm sure he's lucky. Look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry we fooled around and let it ruin our friendship. I'm also sorry that I let Linda cut you out of my life when I thought we had a chance to be friends again. But as a friend, I need your help. Asshole, Nick left her stewing. What do you want, Nick? He told her. There was silence on the line. Then there was laughter. I agree, she said, calming down, but he could still hear the smile in her voice. You always made me laugh. Thank you, Maggie. When the dust settles, you'll have to introduce me to Mr. Lucky so I can congratulate him on his fine taste and take you both out to dinner. It's a date, she said. He needed somewhere to hide out for a while and make a plan of action, so he found an extended stay hotel outside the Beltway in Fairfax, far enough away from the usual places he and Linda frequented that he wouldn't be spotted, settled in, and went to get some food. He wasn't particularly hungry, but he knew he needed something in his stomach to digest the alcohol he was about to drink. The restaurant called El Mariachi was across the street from the hotel. It would be enough, because the frijoles and cheese would just make him sick. As the hostess sat him down in a booth, he saw the bartender looking at him. He seemed vaguely familiar, but Nick put the thought out of his mind. He had enough to worry about at the moment. To see pupusas on the menu meant that the restaurant was a Central American establishment pretending to be Mexican. Most Americans didn't know the difference. Along with his meal, he ordered some cheap tequila. He knew the next day's hangover would be brutal, but he considered the pain part of the rite of passage. The waitress returned with a bottle of excellent top-shelf tequila and a highball glass. When Nick looked up at the waitress, she merely pointed to the bartender, who saluted him. Nick accepted the greeting and poured himself a generous portion as the bartender went back to serving other customers. It took a moment, but Nick remembered who he was. He remembered that the bartender was one of the people who had attended Rivera's divorce hearings and the criminal trials Nick had attended. He always sat in the last row by himself. No one ever sat next to him. Once, his client Sonia's daughter hugged him, but when Nick asked Sonia who it was, she remained silent and said he was just a family friend. Nick ate in silence, making notes in his notebook and drinking tequila. When the waitress cleared away the dirty plates, he went to the break room. He felt like everything around him was moving, like on a ship when he walked. He needed to lean against the wall while he went about his business. Then he went back to the booth, trying to keep steady, and found the bartender sitting in his booth on the opposite bench. "Senor Nick, good to see you," he said, extending his hand to Nick and shaking it vigorously. Nick sat down and waited. "I never thanked you for helping my cousin get rid of that bastard she was married to." Nick tried to object that it was nothing, and he was just doing the little he could, but the bartender ignored him. He was badly beaten in prison. "Did you know about it?" "Very badly. They don't think he'll be able to walk again. Or eat solid food." The bartender smiled slightly, telling Nick. Nick felt a chill as he looked at the bartender. "I didn't hear that," Nick said. The bartender shrugged. "That's yesterday's news. What brings you alone to El Mariachi's on Saturday night? Where is your beautiful wife?" Nick looked the bartender straight in the eye. The bartender was still smiling. It wasn't a mocking smile. Rather, it was a smile that knew a lot. Nick couldn't understand why the man had asked such a strange question. How did the bartender even know that Nick was married? Then Nick remembered that Linda had surprised him by showing up at one of the hearings and kissed him after it was over. The bartender must have still been in the courtroom. "We had some problems with her," Nick said. He saw no reason to lie or withhold information. "Like she's having fun with someone else?" There was that familiar smile again. Nick was shockingly silent. "I'm not a lawyer, Don Nicholas, but I know that if you want to keep a secret, you shouldn't write it down and leave the paper in plain sight," the bartender said, gesturing to Nick's notebook. It was labeled with the elements of adultery, a drawing of Dwayne with a knife, the name Linda surrounded by a circle with a slash, and the to-do list included the phrase, "Burn that bitch." Nick shrugged. Bad operational security, but at least he hadn't given away any client secrets. Any man in your situation should ask himself what he wants. What do you really want, Senor Nick? What do you want more than anything else in the world, aside from money, if you could choose revenge? Nick didn't hesitate. I want to punch her nose so hard that it breaks. And I want to punch her in the face so hard that both her eyes darken. She has a very pretty face and very expressive eyes. I want to destroy that. The bartender's smile widened. Then he chuckled, shaking his head. You, my friend, are not thinking rationally. People who retaliate so violently go to jail. You don't want to go to jail, unless it's just to visit your clients and then leave. Isn't that right? The bartender paused and looked at Nick sympathetically. Nick nodded. But perhaps I can be of some use. You helped my cousin with her little problem. She could have asked me for help, but for various reasons she refused to do so. However, you stepped in and took care of her. Nick tried to interrupt. Sure, he had Frank gather the evidence, but he had the police do all the work. It didn't hurt that Nick had asked one of the partners in his firm, a former assistant United States attorney from the area, to have a quiet chat with the Commonwealth's attorney to make sure the criminal case was handled properly. Nick came with his client just to make sure that the prosecutors would treat her with the respect she deserved. His client's divorce itself was a common occurrence after her husband was convicted in a criminal case. The bartender waved away his protests. You must realize that helping forgotten people like my cousin is noteworthy in and of itself. I am indebted to you on behalf of my family. I am repaying my debts. I think you could use some help. Nick looked at him intently. I'm afraid I don't remember your name. The bartender's smile turned into a shark-like grin. Some people call me El Diablo. The devil? The bartender nodded. Only people who don't like me. To my friends, I'm Jose Garcia. Now it was Nick's turn to smile. What do I have to do to get a favor from the devil? Sell my soul? El Diablo's smile disappeared. Nick's smile disappeared too. Be serious. You're a lawyer. You have no soul. He smiled again, and Nick realized he was joking. Call it professional courtesy, Senor Nick. Now give me your address, your wife's name, and tell me about her daily routine. What are you going to do? I have a few ideas. But what is that phrase? Ignorance is blissful ignorance? I think you need to be in blissful ignorance. And be able to report on your movements over the next few months. Get yourself a cell phone so we can keep in touch and leave a number here at the bar. And don't come back here again. It's for the best. Nick told El Diablo that he had hired a private investigator, his plans not to leave the house until Linda left for France, and Linda's plans for the trip. El Diablo knew where the hotel in Paris was, but would not say exactly how. Just one question, Senor Nick. Is there any chance of reconciliation? Forgiveness? Mercy? I don't want to hear about doubts later. El Diablo looked him straight in the eye, the smile gone, the expression serious. Nick returned the look. Nick took a deep breath and paused to double-check his emotions. The path was clear. He was a simple guy. Trust and loyalty. Those were his most important values. His marriage lacked them. Linda flipped a switch in his brain, and love was replaced by hate. In time, upon mature reflection, he wouldn't care. But that time was not now. No. El Diablo relaxed. Okay. Don't worry about a thing. The waitress came with the bill. El Diablo shooed her away but let Nick give her a generous tip. He also let Nick take a bottle of tequila, but warned him to take his time. He needed savvy for the battle. Somehow, Nick woke up Sunday morning at a reasonable time and without much of a hangover. He got to Harry's law office at 10 in the morning and found Frank already there. Sorry, Nick, Frank said. She's definitely having fun with a guy. In your bed. He was there 2 hours after you called me, and he was still there when I left this morning. We got a very good quality video. I made you a copy, but you might not want to look at it. Harry intervened. You'd better not look. I don't want you to do something stupid and get arrested. Don't worry, Nick said, taking the DVD from Frank. Give me the synopsis. I climbed into the treehouse like you said, and they were all there on top of each other. I got very clear shots of their faces and, frankly, the rest of their bodies. Clearly having sex. If anything, I think it's just a physical phenomenon. They hardly talk at all. They were just having fun like rabbits. I don't know if this will change your plans. No, it isn't. What did they do? Well, I won't go through all the positions. But I will say this, they both had a lot of stamina. Thank you. That makes me feel even worse. I'm sorry. Anyway, I know Linda personally from that party you had last year, so I can identify her. We ran the guy's license plate, Dwayne Martin. We know he works with her. We don't know how long it's been going on, but I think it's clear and convincing evidence. Oh, and we have a camera on the front of the house that covers the driveway and garage, so we can tell when they come and go. I'll email you a link to the live feed on our secure server. I've talked to Harry and I'm going to write up a report and supporting affidavit for him to file. Sorry again, friend. Frank shook hands with Harry and Nick and walked out of the office. So, what do you want to do? Asked Harry. File for divorce on the grounds of adultery. But don't file for her. Harry looked at Nick expressionlessly. Trust me, Harry. When I hear those words, I get an upset stomach. I don't want you to do anything stupid here. I expect it to go more smoothly than you realize. Harry grimaced. Look, Harry, just file it Monday afternoon, just before the clerk's office closes. Let me know the case number. I'll take care of the rest. Just remember, Nick, I don't practice criminal law. Not very well, anyway. If you need to get out of some kind of trouble, I can't help you. You'll be pleasantly surprised, Nick said as he walked out the door. Nick's next stop was a meeting with Sam Granger. It was a very productive meeting where Nick learned that they could sell the house for over $100,000 more than the mortgage, and with no commission to the real estate agent. Linda would be thrilled. Nick promised to have all the necessary paperwork ready to close the deal as soon as possible. Leaving Sam's office, Nick looked at his phone. No messages, no calls. She must still be having fun with Dwayne. Nick took the opportunity to call his boss Sven and tell him that he urgently needed 2 weeks of vacation or he was quitting. Sven immediately panicked because Nick was the only one who knew what was going on with the case and agreed. Fortunately, there was a lull in Sven's business, so he could give Nick some slack. Having laid the groundwork, Nick returned to the hotel to get down to the real work. By Monday evening, he was ready. On Sunday night and Monday, Linda left voice messages that he didn't respond to. He was saving all his energy for Tuesday morning. Thanks to Frank's camera set up in front of the house, Nick knew that Dwayne had spent Monday night there, and judging by the fact that Dwayne had been there from Sunday night to Monday morning, he would likely leave for work around 8 a.m. Linda will leave around 8:30 a.m. So, at 7 a.m., Nick walked in the front door and yelled, "Honey, I'm home!" He heard sharp footsteps upstairs, and then Linda came down the stairs in her robe, disheveled and shocked. "Honey, what a surprise!" she said, trying to sound cheerful, but barely on her feet and clearly on the verge of panic. "I thought you'd be gone until Friday. You didn't return my calls." "Sorry," Nick replied cheerfully. "You know how it is on the road." Nick pretended not to notice the wine glasses in the living room and headed straight for the dining room. Linda stood in the doorway, staring at Nick, trying to figure out what she should do next to keep him from going up the stairs to where Dwayne was obviously hiding. A knock on the door caught her off guard. "Can you get it, honey?" asked Nick. In the meantime, he began to spread out the papers on the dining room table and pretended not to notice Linda squaring her shoulders and going to open the door, perhaps expecting to see the bailiff with the divorce papers. But instead, Maggie came in just as Linda opened the door and said simply, "Hi." Linda watched curiously as Maggie sat down at the dining room table and opened the briefcase. "I'm sorry, honey," Nick said. "But I don't know when I'm going to come up for air again, and you know I can't think about you going on an overseas trip without a renewed power of attorney. You know, just in case something goes wrong and we have to deal with some financial or medical issues. Oh, and I also had a couple moments over the weekend and got an offer to refinance my mortgage at a very favorable rate. Since we'll both be traveling, I figured this was the only time we'd be able to do it. I apologize for the short notice." He tried to look apologetic. "Who's that?" asked Linda, pointing at Maggie when the artery in her temple stopped pulsing so hard. "I'm Maggie." Maggie is a notary, Nick explained. Linda visibly relaxed. She still had a lover hidden upstairs, but events weren't quite out of control yet. This is my Boy Scout. Always ready, she said with a smirk as she sat down, though her eyes were still wary. It's just the way I am, darling. He handed Linda a pen and began shifting papers in front of her. The check marks with arrows indicate where you need to sign. Take your time reading them if you want to. I trust you, Linda said with a wide smile, quickly signing all the papers in front of her. He hoped that was the case, because otherwise he wasn't going to get anywhere. But he who dares wins, as they say. While Linda signed each document, Nick arranged them and handed them to Maggie, who lined them up and notarized them. Mrs. Buford, do you have a photo ID? Asked Maggie. Linda got up from the table to find her purse. Maggie and Nick exchanged glances, but both had to quickly lower their eyes to the table to keep from laughing. Linda brought her driver's license to the table. Maggie took a picture of it with her phone and wrote the information in her notary journal. Linda offered coffee, but both Nick and Maggie declined while Maggie wrote down the documents she had notarized in her journal, and Nick moved everything into different folders. Linda looked up, expecting Nick to try to go there and calculating her next move. Maggie left, putting away all the tools and smiled at Nick when Linda wasn't looking. Nick gave Linda a break, saying that he needed to have a teleconference and would go down to his basement office to do so. Linda's shoulders relaxed, for now she would have time to escort Dwayne out the door and remove any trace of his presence before Nick reappeared from his man cave. Nick went downstairs to give her the illusion that she was still fooling him. He pretended he didn't hear Dwayne's heavy footsteps coming down the stairs or the sound of the garage door opening so Dwayne's car could pull out. But when he heard the sound of the shower running in the master bath, Nick gathered up everything he had, walked out the basement door, and drove away in his car without a word to his loving wife. 2 hours later, after a hearty breakfast at the diner, Nick was in Harry's office. Harry looked shocked. So, are you saying you got the wife to sign a Form CC 1406 agreeing to the service of the divorce petition on her and waiving service of court notices and notices of any future proceedings? Yes. The properly notarized form is right here. And it was. Are you also telling me that you got your wife, an experienced attorney, to sign a property division agreement whereby she gives you all the proceeds from the sale of your house and the property in it, the cars and jewelry she owns, leaves you full discretion over the disposition of her personal belongings, and allows you both to walk away with the retirement accounts each of you has? Without any alimony on your part in her favor? She makes more money than me anyway. According to those documents, she expressed her willingness to get out of the marriage with only about $125,000 in retirement contributions and about $200,000 in undergraduate and law school debt. Is that correct? She's always had a very generous nature. Harry narrowed his eyes as he looked at Nick and went back to the papers on his desk. And you also made her sign an affidavit in which she admits to cheating and even admits that her lover was upstairs in the marital bedroom at the time she signed the affidavit and was there all night after having sex with her the night before? Are you even telling me that her affidavit supports the authenticity and accuracy of this email correspondence in which she talks about staying with her lover because he makes her wet? That's what you're telling me? Counselor, Nick said, showing no emotion as far as he could. The documents speak for themselves. Harry looked at the papers, looked up at Nick, started to smile, suppressed the smile, and twisted in his chair. To hell with it. I'm filing all of this. You're a respected member of the bar and a friend from law school. How was I supposed to know you were making all this up? Everything looked fine to me, Your Honor. I am deeply embarrassed. I was completely consumed by the fact that my client violated my trust. If anyone should be disbarred, it's Nicholas A. Buford, J.D. Esquire, Your Honor. See where I'm going with this, Nick? Uh-huh. If need be, will this notary witness that Linda signed all of this? Yes, it will. Will she testify that Linda scrutinized the documents? I wouldn't want to try to prejudge or influence anyone's testimony, but as you said, Linda is an experienced lawyer who specializes in litigation, so I'm sure she gave the documents the attention she felt they deserved. I'm sure the notary will say she saw Linda Buford review the documents and sign each one. Otherwise, I cannot give an opinion as to her state of mind with respect to understanding the contents of each document. Okay then, Harry said. I'll file all that today, plus Frank's affidavit and report. There are photos and a DVD attached. I'll see if I can't get it out of the electronic file for a while. We don't want it to make the news, do we? No, Nick said. Linda's leaving for Paris in a little over 2 weeks. The longer things go quietly, the better. Do you know anyone at the county courthouse? Do you remember Seth? Asked Harry. Day student next year after us? He had trouble getting a job at the law firm, so now he's clerking at the county courthouse, trying to build up his resume. He might be able to speed up the process. But if the judge wants live testimony, the whole thing could collapse under its own weight. Linda will have to decide she doesn't want to fight the case on fraud on the court when she realizes what's going on. If things go south at that point, I may have to dispense with the services of your attorney. Fair enough. Someday you'll tell me the whole story. But right now I don't want to hear it. For the next 2 weeks, Nick managed to keep Linda at arm's length. He sent her text messages at off hours, letting her know how busy he was, but he answered her calls the rest of the time. Over time, she began to call less frequently. You scared the hell out of her, Frank told him at the end of the week. Judging from the videotape, Dwayne hasn't been in the house once since you showed up and surprised them Tuesday morning. I can't tell if they're meeting at his place during the week or having fun with each other at the office, but they're not doing it in the house. I'll tell you if anything changes. The only thing that had changed was that Nick had quietly returned to the house when he found out Linda was gone and had taken the financial papers he thought he might need. He also signed a contract to sell the house to Sam Granger. The transaction was to take place during Linda's first week in France. The rest of the time, Nick went to the gym, did some leisure reading, and pondered how he had gotten to the point where he was 30 years old with his life in such disarray. He told Sven that he needed a few more weeks off, and Sven reluctantly agreed. She's having fun with him at the house again, Frank said Saturday, a week before Linda was scheduled to leave for Paris. Thanks for the heads up, Nick replied. He didn't care, but he knew that once he got rid of the house, he'd rather burn the sheets than sell them. By this time, Nick had watched the video that Frank had given him the first time. He realized his attraction. Dwayne was a couple years younger, and as Frank's investigation had revealed, the guy was a gym rat, constantly pulling himself up in front of the mirror after weight training. Otherwise, he was unremarkable. In comparison, Nick was in decent shape but certainly didn't have a taut belly. Linda was obviously looking for arm candy. Nick could well do without such superficiality. Before Nick knew it, Linda was on her long-awaited trip to Paris. One of Frank's men followed her to the airport and waited for the plane to take off, bound for Europe. Upon receiving the news, Nick went to the house, put all of Linda's clothes in a pile in the living room, and packed up everything he wanted to keep. The next day, the movers arrived, packed Linda's things, and sent them to the warehouse. Separately, they packed Nick's things and moved them to the apartment he had found. Thanks to Sam Granger, a skillful reseller, Nick was able to sell the furniture easily. When the house was finally empty, Nick went around the house one last time before doing one last thing. He carefully gathered up the wedding photos and album, as well as Linda's wedding dress. He took them to the fire pit on the patio that was under the treehouse, carefully placed the photos and album in the fire pit on top of the embers, added the dress, some lighter fluid, and lit a match. After everything burned down, Nick was pleased to see that there was indeed a lot of detail in the video. You could even make out the details in each photo as it was added to the pit. A day later, Nick closed on the sale of the marital home, using his wife's power of attorney to sign as her de facto attorney. She really should have read everything she signed. With a separate financial power of attorney, Nick was able to deposit the check for the profit from the sale of the house into his personal account, certifying it on his wife's behalf as her attorney in fact, and close the joint accounts. 3 days after that, still in the first week of Linda's trip to La Belle France, a construction crew leveled the house. A few days later, they removed the rubble. After that, work began to prepare the site. Unfortunately, the tree with the treehouse, which was perfect for the children, had to be removed. According to the new plan, there was to be a gazebo there. Unfortunately, the moment that only a large square of land remained in place of Nick and Linda's happy home, construction stopped. It seems something went wrong in the permitting process. Nick and his law school friend who worked in the county permit office were confident that the problem would resolve itself within a couple of days of Linda's return from France, as soon as the proper forms were received and approved. In all that time, Nick hadn't returned a single call from Linda. He stopped sending her text messages, did not respond to emails or voicemails. Some of her friends and family called. Nick sent curt messages back saying he was busy and traveling, mostly so they wouldn't try to drive by the house to see him. El Diablo called him on his landline and told him that Linda and Dwayne seemed to be stressed and didn't look their best. She probably suspects that something is wrong. Nick asked how he knew that. El Diablo simply said that he has friends and family everywhere, even in Europe. He asked Nick if he wanted Linda's wedding and engagement rings back. When Nick answered in the negative, El Diablo asked if he would mind if someone else acquired them. Hell no. Okay. I might know someone who would like them. On Wednesday, 2 days before Linda was due back from Paris, Nick was in Harry's office. I don't know how it happened, but here's the divorce decree. It's a lot quicker than usual for this kind of thing, and Seth didn't tell me anything. I don't want to know, and I'm not asking. Consider yourself lucky, and congratulations on being single again. Here's a copy I'll send to your ex-wife. I'm sure she'll be thrilled. As Nick was getting into his car outside Harry's office, his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but when he answered it, he recognized El Diablo's voice. Nick, you need to take a vacation. Right now. Go someplace where there are a lot of people. People who know you and can tell you've been there. El Diablo hung up the phone. Nick realized he hadn't seen his college friends who lived in New York in a while. Luckily, they had free schedules in the next few days, so he went on Amtrak that afternoon, went to a few shows, visited a few museums, and joined his friends for lunch, coffee, and dinner, most of which he paid for with a credit card. He also tipped generously at the hotel so that all the staff knew who he was. While there, he express mailed to Linda's parents' home a copy of a DVD of him burning her wedding dress and wedding album. Late one Sunday night, after Nick was enjoying coffee and cake at Little Italy in Manhattan, his phone rang. It was his father-in-law. Nick? Where are you? Linda's going crazy. She's in the hospital. Yeah? What's wrong with her? It was getting more and more interesting. She returned from a business trip on Friday, but she and a colleague were apparently kidnapped at the airport. They were drugged and were only able to get out this morning. The co-worker was beaten nearly to death. And Linda. Here her father's voice trembled. Once upon a time, Nick might have sympathized. What happened to Linda? When she woke up, she discovered she was covered head to toe in tattoos. Tattoos with horrible inscriptions, like that she was a whore and a slut. And as soon as she woke up and saw that, some guy in a mask came in and punched her in the nose, breaking it, and then gave her 2 black eyes. Impressive, Nick thought. Really, it was the cherry on top of the ice cream. He would have been happy if Linda had realized that he had betrayed her in court, just as she had betrayed him in marriage. But this was just a rainbow orgasm of joy. It would be worth an immortal soul if he could give it away. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm out of town right now. What would you like me to do? Nick realized that the other end of the wire was surprised. You're her husband. She's your wife! Unfortunately, no. We are divorced. The order was issued last week. She's cheating on me with the guy she's traveling with. What? What exactly was unclear? Nick realized he was showing unnecessary cruelty right now, but he didn't care. I have the video. I can send you a copy if you'd like. There was silence on the other end of the line. Nick wondered if his father-in-law was having a heart attack. We're done with her, so you'll have to take her home. She's not my problem now. You did it! Shouted his father-in-law. I've been in New York since Wednesday, celebrating my divorce. Look, I know you're upset, and I hope Linda gets better soon, but I don't think we have anything to say to each other. He hung up the phone. It occurred to Nick at that moment that the stress of city life had been too much lately. He sent Sven an email saying that Sven and the firm could go to hell, respectfully after all. A quick internet search revealed that there was an REI store in Soho, and Nick got himself some new hiking and camping gear. Linda had never liked camping, so this was a chance to reconnect with her scouting past. The hotel was very accommodating and agreed to leave his luggage for a while for a reasonable fee, and Nick was on his way to the Adirondack Mountains to commune with nature until things calmed down. Luckily, he had his passport with him in case he had time to travel to Canada. And it turned out he did have time. For most of the next 8 weeks, he turned his phone off. At first, he thought some crazy woman had stolen his ex-wife's phone because there were dozens, if not hundreds, of messages that seemed to include frantic screaming and crying. He only listened to 1 or 2 and deleted the rest. Lots of crazy emails, too. Her account must have been hacked. How could he have taken the time to read all this? He hoped that whoever this crazy woman was, she would get the help she so desperately needed. 8 weeks later, Nick met Frank for a drink. Harry was there, too. "Just so we're clear," Harry said as they sat down at the table, "I terminated our relationship with our attorney immediately after I served you with the divorce decree. I notified you by registered mail. Perhaps you haven't checked your mail yet." "Not yet," Nick admitted. "A serious shitstorm, my friend," Harry said. "Frank, what would you say?" "More like a typhoon of shit." "I like that. There's shit everywhere anyway. Lots of destruction." Harry drank his bourbon and immediately asked for another. "Get started, Frank." So, Monday morning, the former Mrs. Buford is on her way to the old homestead with her parents. We didn't have time to take the outside camera down. When she sees the vacant lot, she has a complete meltdown. She falls to her knees, sobs, goes into fetal position. She ends up kicking and screaming like a kid at the mall late at night. Then the equipment crew arrives and she loses her temper again. The third time she loses her temper is when the construction workers see what she has tattooed on her face and start laughing. I have to say that the work is so good that the text is very visible on camera. Whore, puta, I love cock and the like. Face, neck, arms. And that's despite the fact that she has raccoon eyes from being punched, plus duct tape for a broken nose. Harry picked up the story. That afternoon, she and a couple other lawyers from big firms showed up at my humble office. They didn't have an appointment, so I made them wait 15 minutes. Made sure my Glock was loaded and in my desk. Thank God we're in Virginia, you know. 15 minutes later, they were all already yelling at me, talking about emergency motions, bar complaints, and contempt proceedings. I have to admit that I had a hard time not looking at the ink all over my face. They were done very clearly in red and blue ink so that they could be seen from a distance. When I was able to shift my attention, I asked what exactly was the problem. Which statement in any of the statements was false? They all stopped and looked at each other. Then I asked if there was an argument about your ex committing adultery. They all answered yes. Then I turned on the videotape I had turned on while they were waiting, and good old Linda is clearly writing up and down on the genitals of someone who is not her husband in the marital bed. Obviously, they haven't familiarized themselves with all the case files yet. Everyone just looked at each other in confusion. Then Linda started yelling that you didn't even give her a chance to explain. And I said you didn't care what the reason was, as long as you did it. She came to her senses and started telling me that she never agreed to let you sell the house and that you burned her wedding dress, pictures, and album. All of those things were her personal property. I showed her copies of powers of attorney, one of which was specifically for the sale of the house. I showed her the property settlement agreement, which gave you discretion to dispose of her personal belongings, and told her she was lucky she still had her clothes. I asked if she denied that her signature was on the documents. She replied that she did not, but that she had never agreed to anything that was written in them. I then asked if her entire defense was that she never read what she signed. I asked her to imagine how she would be cross-examined if she challenged anything in court. At that point, she was silent. I also pointed to an affidavit she had signed where she admitted that her lover was upstairs at the very moment she was signing and asked if that was true. At this point, she lost consciousness. He tried to bring her to her senses, but I just called 911. She refused to go to the hospital with them. But then she started yelling about tattoos and about her boyfriend getting beat up. And I said you had nothing to do with it as far as I know, and you're out of town anyway. And Dwayne probably pissed off some other wife's husband by sleeping with her, or some other woman who thought Linda was beating Dwayne off her. I told them they knew where the Fairfax Police Department was if they had a criminal case they wanted to discuss. I'm sorry I missed all that. It's getting better, Harry said. So they were still going on, talking about filing a motion for reconsideration and all that. And then I told them that just that morning, I'd gotten an anonymous email with links to some videotapes of Linda and Dwayne in your bed when they started doing it again in front of Paris. The message said that the videotapes would be sent out to everyone Linda knew, and that you, Nick, knew nothing about it and couldn't stop them. And that these are friends you've helped, and that they'll protect you, and that they'll hit the send button the same day if she doesn't leave it alone. Do you know anything about that? I was out of town, Harry. After that, they left. I haven't heard from them since, and nothing happened at the courthouse. It was Frank's turn again. They must have gone to the police because they were approached by a couple detectives. They wanted copies of the videotape and the report. Then they lost interest. Neither Linda nor Dwayne could say what happened. Only that they got into a cab at the airport, and the next thing the guy knew, he ended up in the hospital. Linda woke up in a rundown hotel, got punched in the face, and ended up in the hospital. The room was billed to her credit card, too. Plus room service and a minibar. This time, Nick revealed that, according to the hotel manager, New York police officers checked on his stay and also contacted his New York friends. But they all vouched for his very active schedule in the city. Word on the street, Harry said, is that your ex is hiding in her parents' basement while she undergoes a laser tattoo removal procedure. Problem is, they charge by the square inch and she's covered from head to toe. It must cost tens of thousands of dollars. That's too bad, Nick said. Harry cast a glance at Nick. Frank only pressed his lips together to keep from laughing. What happened to Meat Eater? From what I understand, he's hurt pretty badly, Harry said. He's going to have a lot of physical therapy in the future. His head is a little damaged. Multiple concussions. He'll probably have a hard time finding another paralegal job. Their firm let them both go too. Seems their relationship had broken down during the trip, and it had somehow negatively impacted the whole arbitration. Things were missed, exhibits were not ready. There were problems with witness notes. They lost on the merits. The client was not happy. The firm had to make human sacrifices to keep the client for future work. Someday, Nick, you'll have to tell us how you did it, Frank said. Managed what? I'm a Boy Scout. Maggie was waiting in the car when he left. I'm a little jealous. No one asked me if I actually notarized the documents or if she read them before signing. I was willing to say that I watched her study each document before signing, but I couldn't estimate how much time she spent on it. We should discuss this over dinner. I need to buy you and the boyfriend a treat to thank you for helping me gain my freedom. Maggie turned to him and looked over her sunglasses as Nick drove the car out of the parking lot. There's no boyfriend, you idiot. Nick braked abruptly and looked at her. Really? Now shut up and take me home so you can begin the rather long and grueling process of apologizing to me. Okay, Nick smiled, but I have to stop by the post office first. Why? I'm sending a card to a friend, Nick said, pulling it out of the glove compartment. There was a Boy Scout emblem on the front. I'm asking her if she feels safe right now. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.